Hi there, folks. Malachi here from Leaf and Stem. Today I wanted to cover two topics relatively briefly. The first is about Peterson Hyde Park, the tobacco that I opened and tried in my last video. I have it packed here into my Shire Cobbet. And I wanted to give some of my thoughts on this tobacco and tell you guys how I'm enjoying it after smoking it for about a week now. And the second, which I want to cover a little more extensively, was a question brought up by a viewer on my last video, the same Peterson one. And the viewer's name was Ebby the Baptist, and they asked if I would ever make a video about Tonguebite because they were having issues with it. And Tonguebite is an interesting topic to me. It's very interesting because it's been covered really extensively by most people who make pipe-related content, whether it be YouTube videos or on forums or what have you. But everyone experiences Tonguebite at some point, and it's just a part of smoking the pipe, it seems. And I know for myself, I can say that I have had pretty extensive issues with Tonguebite, especially toward the beginning of starting to smoke the pipe. And I've only been smoking for about 5 months at this point. And just here recently, maybe over the last month, I've been able to find workarounds for my Tonguebite issues. So it seems for me, the biggest variable, and there are a number of variables, and they're unique to every person, which is what makes this such an interesting topic because everyone has a different experience with it. The biggest variable for me so far has been the moisture of my tobacco. And this is probably what you're going to hear the most commonly, because that seems to be the most prevalent issue for people who are experiencing Tonguebite, is that tobacco generally, pipe tobacco that is generally sold at a moister, I don't know if moisture is a word, but a more moist than optimal moisture level. And that is probably because they expect you to lose a little bit of that during processing. I guess the typical pipe blender is expecting you to open a tin and smoke through that tin, and you're going to lose some moisture over a week or two or a month even of smoking through a tin of tobacco, to the point that it will lose all its moisture if you're not careful about it. But if you smoke it in a reasonable amount of time, that's typically not something you'd have to worry about. But it's typically sold much more moist than it needs to be for smoking, and so it's optimal in most situations to dry your tobacco a little bit. To do that, you would just lay it out on like a plate or lay it on some sort of receptacle for 30 minutes to a couple hours, depending on how moist the tobacco is. I use this little plate here I got from a farmer's market. I got it because I thought it looked a little bit like a tobacco leaf. Not as wide or broad, but I thought it looked cool, like a young tobacco leaf. And so this is a cute little thing that I use. Holds about a bowl full of tobacco really perfectly. And it's got this pointed tip, so anything that I don't use, I can just scrape off back into the jar or the tin. But you can over dry your tobacco. So I would shoot for about a half hour to start off with. And if that tobacco that you wanted to dry is starting to get a little crispy and is starting to fall apart when you press it together, I'll give you an example with the Hyde Park, because this one's a little less dried than I would like. So you see right here, when I press this together, it sort of holds its shape a little bit, but it starts to unravel. And this is getting just about the perfect moisture. It's been open for about a week. That's about what you want. You want it to start to unravel once you press it, but you don't want it to crackle and to crunch. When it's too moist, it'll just compress into like a little cake, and we'll have trouble peeling apart on its own. So that's tip number one. Always make sure that your tobacco is at the right moisture. That is different for every tobacco, and your mileage may vary, so you may have to experiment with the tobacco for a little bit at different moisture levels and see what works the best for you. And some tobaccos do start to lose a little bit of flavor once you dry them all the way out. So it's definitely be careful with it. Be mindful of how much you are drying your tobacco. And if you don't have the time to dry the tobacco, leave it sitting aside for 30 minutes to 2 hours. If you just want to smoke a bowl of tobacco right there, but you don't have any properly dried, you can take that plate of tobacco or whatever you're using and toss it in the microwave for about 5 seconds at a time. You lay a paper towel under it, that'll help it absorb some of the moisture. And like I said, zap it for like 5 seconds, give it a feel. And if it's not where you want it to be, give it another 5 seconds, and eventually it will dry out to your desired temperature. But I generally don't like to do that because I feel like rushing the process might affect the flavor a little bit. So, moisture is the big one. Another thing to consider is the drink that you might be having. And that's a big thing. Always drink something when you're smoking tobacco, especially if you're having trouble with tongue bite or moisture issues. Before we get to the water, if you do get tongue bite, give it some time to rest. Give it 2 days, give it 3 days, give it a week if you have to. My biggest issue was trying to smoke immediately the day after I bit my tongue, and it would just basically refresh that tongue bite. It would the whatever spots were having issues, it would just get worse. And it got to the point that like the side of my tongue was all dry and just painful and had like it had a weird texture. It was very uncomfortable. And so I had to stop smoking for a week basically and reset my palate a little bit. And when I went back into it, I was having way less issue with tongue bite. So always make sure that your mouth is properly rested. If you have a lot of canker sores, or if you have a cut in your mouth, or if you just bit the hell out of your cheek and it's all torn up, I would suggest not smoking tobacco. For one, your mouth is going to be a lot less resistant to the carcinogens and stuff in the tobacco because it's going to be focused on healing that wound or healing whatever is wrong with your mouth. So I would suggest steering away from tobacco a little bit in those instances, and you're just going to get tongue bit. Your mouth is not going to have the protective layer that it needs to protect you from that smoke. Like I said, it's going to be focused on other things, and it's just going to be easier to get tongue bite. So always make sure your mouth is in good condition before you smoke tobacco. And generally, you don't want to mix alcoholic drinks with tobacco. I do from time to time have a beer with it, have a beer with a bowl, and it's enjoyable. But if you're doing something like whiskey, it's just gonna really degrade the membrane in your mouth that protects you from all these carcinogens and stuff. Um, and they're sort of exponential. Like drinking alcohol is not good for your mouth. Smoking tobacco is obviously not good for your mouth. But when you do them together, they kind of layer up in an exponential way, and both of them become much worse than they are on their own. So generally, steer away from enjoying tobacco with alcohol. Of course, your mileage may vary. It might be one of your favorite things to do, and if so, just do it in moderation and just be mindful that it is a little more harmful to your mouth to do both of those together. And you will, in turn, get much worse tongue bite, in my experience. And also, I tend to, when I have had a few drinks and I, start to get a little bit tipsy, I start to lose my inhibition about puffing on my pipe, and I just get to puffing like crazy. And I wake up the next morning and I got tongue bite, almost without fail. Drinks are important. As I said, always have a drink with your pipe. Ideally, my favorite drink to have is just plain flat water on the cooler side because I find that more soothing for my mouth. Um, or I'll have a cup of black coffee. This probably isn't the best because it's very acidic, and a lot of the issues that you're getting with tongue bite are going to be amplified again by an acidic drink that's kind of uh, damaging your mouth biome. So coffee's not really the best one, but it's a really common one because it complements a lot of the flavors in tobacco. Though I have heard that if you put a little bit of fat in your coffee, which I'm not a big fan of, like some milk or creamer, I have heard that that tends to round out the sort of bitiness of it. And generally, fat in your mouth will help with tongue bite because it'll give you a little bit more of a protective layer. So if you are into lattes or just putting milk or creamer in your coffee, I would recommend doing that if you're going to be enjoying a pipe with it. Um, and yeah, drinks are important. Just stay hydrated. A lot of tongue bite is your mouth getting dried out and thus getting irritated from hot smoke in it. So as long as you make sure you stay hydrated, um, and you're drinking the right thing, that's definitely something that you can do to combat tongue bite. Some tobaccos have qualities that just don't mesh with other people, um, or particular people. It might have the pH level might not be right for your mouth, and then you'll just react badly to that. And for some people, that just happens every time with certain tobaccos. Red Virginias are a big one because they're very acidic, and some people find that they just irritate their mouth always, regardless, no matter what method they use. Um, so sometimes you might run into something like that, and it might take a good bit of trial and error before you realize that that's not the tobacco for you. And it's unfortunate when that does happen because there's not much you can do about it. And the final tip for tongue bite would just be to slow down. Um, and moisture and this kind of go hand in hand. I should have mentioned this after the moisture conversation because a lot of puffing really fast on your pipe for me has been trying to keep it lit because it was not dried properly, and it'll be to the point where I'm either getting no smoke at all. I'm sitting there and toking on my pipe trying to get um, a decent bit of smoke off of it, or just trying to keep it lit, and it will burn me. And so generally, um, pack lighter. Make sure you got the right airflow, um, which is hard to determine. But once you do get a feel for that, pack lighter and smoke slower. So dry your tobacco, pack it a little bit lighter, smoke a little bit slower. Be mindful of what you're drinking while you're enjoying your tobacco, and you know it might take time to figure out which factor is really affecting you the most. And then once you figure that out, it might take time to figure out how to combat that. So just be patient with yourself. Tongue bite is something that everyone deals with, and some people have it so bad that they just have to put the pipe down altogether. But there are a lot of things that you can do to start to combat the tongue bite. And once you can narrow down what your particular issue is, it's a lot easier to either avoid whatever that issue is or to take steps to make it a little bit better. So I'm not actually going to get to the Hyde Park in this video because I'm running out of time in my storage. So I will hopefully be back with another update video soon. But those are my thoughts on tongue bite. A little bit drawn out and convoluted, but I hope I got my point across. Um, yeah, like I said, just follow those steps that I told you. Be patient with yourself. And at the end of the day, smoking tobacco isn't for everyone. So if you just try and try and try and you're just not enjoying yourself, maybe give yourself some time and then come back to it. There are tons of great YouTube resources out there. So look up resources on the internet and enjoy yourself at the end of the day. So that's going to be all from me. I'll catch you guys later. See you.